2 days ago, we arrived in Minnesota with Lana the Lancer, a running, driving Evo 9 MR and RS motors. The plan was for Evo experts Ronnie and Paul to take a handful of parts sourced from MA Performance and put a little bit more pep in Lana's step. It was going to be a concise, short build over the course of 2 days, or at least that was the plan. But the best laid plans of mice and YouTubers often go awry, especially when Ronnie decides the frame is going to get pulled. Years ago, I bought this car wrecked, and the frame was never completely straight afterwards. We decided to make sure that changed this week, so the engine came out of the car entirely, and the frame was pulled perfectly straight by a nearby frame shop with a new subframe installed. Now, day 3, a day after the car was supposed to be finished, Ronnie and Paul hustled to reinstall the heavily refreshed drivetrain, to get the car started again and tuned so I can get back on the road to go home. This new stage of the Evo's history concludes today.
Today we're going to try and get as much of the engine done as far as back into the car, running and tuned with no more detours, hopefully. I think we're getting really close, so trying to just foresee what's going to come up and stay ahead so we can get you back on the road, back home.
Today, only Ronnie, Paul, and myself will be in the shop as Ben goes to film the ice racing video in Wisconsin. The very first thing to tackle is the engine. Since Monday, the head has been removed, hot tanked, resurfaced, and fitted with new GSC S2 cams and Beehive valve springs that I bought on impulse at MAP. The block, meanwhile, has been stripped, the oil pump replaced, and the whole long block reassembled with a fresh head gasket and ARP 625 Plus head studs. The clutch has been upgraded from a stock XD unit to XD's heavy-duty twin disc, and the 6-speed reattached. Now, all this just has to go back in.
I had as far here as possible, so everything.
We often think of the engine going in or out as a daunting process, but for Ron and Paul, it only took about 10 minutes to slot the engine into the bay and connect all the motor mounts. With the frame pulled, they literally had more room to work. With the engine and transmission slotted in, and the AC bolted back to the motor, the rest of the drivetrain can be reinstalled.
Our goal is to get this fired up by noon. Hopefully fired up by noon.
We have 2.5 hours.
Is it really?
No, 2 hours and 15 minutes.
As Paul gets to work buttoning up the wiring harness and additional accessories, Ronnie bolts the new exhaust components to the turbo. The OEM exhaust manifold has been replaced with a Force Performance header, ported and ceramic coated for optimal flow and heat containment.
These flappers are known to get loose, so you can kind of see actually there's not much pressure there as far as preload. So we'll adjust that. Yeah, it's actually already kind of pre-open.
So that makes it more difficult to hold loose?
Yeah, or spool up. So you're sacrificing some since it's somewhat open already.
The OEM O2 housing, the first exhaust component to follow the turbo, where the upstream O2 sensor lives, has been replaced with an NVIDIA O2 housing, which features a half-inch larger diameter opening to the downpipe for better exhaust flow. With the tedious exhaust bolts finally in place, the manifold, turbo, and housing are ready to be reinstalled as a single unit. Again, for now the car is staying stock turbo, for a good reason that will be explained later. Paul continues buttoning up the engine bay, connecting the MAP lower intercooler pipe, a part usually worth about 10 horsepower on a stock car. Ron begins to fill up the transmission with fluid. I've always used OEM Mitsubishi Diaqueen fluids on the 6-speed and differentials, something that Ron is also a fan of. With the turbo back in, I prepare the titanium Tomei Extreme to be installed, wiping down the pipe to remove any fingerprints that might be burned on when the exhaust gases start flowing. With that, it's time to install. Exhaust installs on Evos are a beautifully painless process, and it takes 2 minutes to get the Tomei fitted up. It feels good to know that we're losing 13 pounds of weight with the titanium pipe, but to be honest, I'm most excited for the sound. Lana's exhaust note has always been very restrained for a long time, but with the extra power, I feel like we deserve a little extra sound. As Ron fills the built diff from Andy with Diaqueen, Paul finishes up the exhaust install with an NVIDIA downpipe connected to MAP's proprietary high-flow cap.
I believe right now we have battery left and intake and blow-off valve. I believe all the fluids are in, and then we're gonna fire it up. Hopefully get the wheels straight fairly quickly and then get on the dyno.
Unfortunately, we aren't able to install the new intake components on the car because we don't have the right intercooler pipe and small battery to make room in the engine bay.
We have stock piping existing on the car and stock big battery. So for this pipe to work and this blow-off valve, it would require having to position the blow-off valve somewhere on top, which is where the piping is going. And with this in position, there's no room for the blow-off valve to sit down there. So these two parts will have to wait until we have an upper pipe and a battery that's a little smaller so we could fit more parts in the engine bay.
This means we'll have to run the stock blow-off valve for now, rather than the nice new Tile QRJ Ronin had recommended. But because the stock spring in the OEM BOV isn't designed to hold 25 psi from the factory, a little bit of modification is in order.
I crush it probably up to just to this guy's sunken in. Well, that should be it.
What is the purpose of that?
These are, I think, 7 psi spring inside. So it's when you crush it, you're making a spring, so it holds that valve with more pressure. So it should pop off somewhere around 28, 29 psi instead of 22. That's it.
Likewise, Paul needs to modify the wiring on the fuel system thanks to the Fuel Injector Clinic 1050cc injectors that will flow the E85.
Alright, so what I'm doing here is removing the resistor box for injectors. Obviously, since this car has got the high impedance injector now, we have to delete this box. So anytime you go with that kind of like FICs or IDs, they normally make a plug and play one that you can just disconnect this and then plug it in. But obviously, sometimes you don't get it with, and you can customize yours and just delete this away. And then solder all the wires together, and pretty much comes to the same.
At last, it's time to fire the car up and see how it runs with the new oil pump and headwork. The car runs well and sounds amazing, but there's a small problem.
Zero? Right now we're waiting for the oil pressure to register. We have everything apart, so there's nothing that's got any oil in it right now. I'm assuming it's all on the bottom end, it's not registering up top yet, so we'll see. We have the turbo oil line off, just waiting for it to get pressure.
The lack of oil pressure reading is problematic, even more so than normal because Ron has replaced the oil pump. The longer the issue persists, the more the thought begins to creep into our minds. Is it possible that the new pump is faulty? Should we have just left the old pump in? We'll be spending valuable hours installing the old pump just to see if that solves the problem. Full disclosure, I became pretty uncomfortable filming this diagnosis because I didn't want to stress out Ron and Paul any more than necessary, but within an hour, Ron was able to solve the issue by sending oil through the sending line, pressurizing the new oil pump, and forcing air out of it.
Did you get oil pressure?
Yes, finally. Nerve-wracking. We have bigger injectors in there now, so every time we fire it up, it smokes up the whole garage. I'm just gonna flash it for the right size injectors.
The engine is running now with full oil pressure, but we're almost out of time. I still have a drive ahead of me once the car is finished, and we've yet to tune it. Ron and Paul gave the car a quick alignment to prepare it for the finale, the dyno.
Dyno time. Finally. That's what we've been waiting for.
How much power is it going to make?
A lot. A lot. I'm hoping for at least 350. But if we get 370s, I'd say that'll be very good. I have to retract the statement before about the cams. When we max out turbos, the stock cams are sufficient. But I don't think we're maxing out this turbo. So we'll find out, around 24, 25 pounds if this cams would help a stock turbo. So if we start making power, then it should be the cams.
2 days ago, the car made 313 wheel horsepower and 276 wheel torque on Ronnie's Mustang dyno the way that it rolled in, on pump gas. Now, we get to see what it can do with the new parts on E85 and with a tune to compensate.
First test drive after taking this car down to frame pretty much and get the frame straightened out. I'm actually more happy about the frame being fixed than the engine itself.
With about a quarter tank of some nice 93 fuel that I'd brought up from Virginia, Ronnie gets to work constructing his 93 tune. The initial pulls are restrained and mostly for diagnostic purposes.
So when you have the ignition on, throttle all the way down to the floor, the service engine soon will blink. So we'll just go slow as pump gas and fast as E85.
Easy to remember.
Yeah. Right now I'm just looking at boost ramp and where the AFR would be, so I can start making my corrections before we go into higher boost levels. So far, that's your comparison. You see how your graph before, the boost came in like a 37 peak boost? Remember that I told you your wastegate was like loose? It would create like more lag. And since we tighten it, now it comes in through here. So even that gain, like from there. Peak boosts at 31 instead of 37, 38.
That's like crazy fast for peak boost, isn't it? Isn't that like Evo?
Yeah, and that's because you had the wastegate like not preloaded properly.
Okay.
We're at a lot lower boost still. We're only at 17 pounds, and the earlier one was like 20, 24. For a fourth gear pull on a stock turbo, it should be around 3,000, which we're right on par with that. Should we at least match what you did on pump gas?
That would be cool, but I don't know if we have enough.
We'll see. I'm done with pump gas. Goal is just to beat your old tune, right? 320 horse and 316 torque.
And we're out of pump gas now?
We're pretty much out, but I want to compare it to your best run. So we're still at less boost with a lot more power, especially here.
Jeez. Wait, how many PSI?
She's awake. We're at 23 and tapering down to 17. The solid line is current. The dotted lines are the before.
With the limited fuel we had, Ron was able to not only eclipse the previous horsepower we made on 93, up to 320 wheel horsepower, but added over 40 wheel torque, a crucial gain on track, with a much flatter and less peaky power band. And by manually adjusting the slack out of the wastegate, he brought peak spool on 600 RPM sooner, from 3700 to 3100. The increase in usable power will be absolutely massive. Now, it's time for E85. Also, I want to reiterate that the last tune I got from Jermaine was a fantastic tune as well. He tuned the car when it was basically stock, and since then I've thrown on a few mods which likely contributed to the spiky boost and messy power band. I'd trust both Ron and Jermaine to tune my cars any day. But as Paul prepares the car to tune on E85, we're faced with a new problem: snow. Given that this series was filmed in Minnesota in February, it stands to reason that we might have to deal with some snow, but with a 3-hour drive to our hotel in Wisconsin ahead of me, and literally the same set of summer tires I drove from Florida to Alaska on 2 years ago mounted on the car, that's definitely not going to work. Luckily, Ron was able to facilitate my last impulse buy of the series, a brand new set of General Ultimax Arctic 12 winter tires. We pulled the stock BBSs off Lana to swap the tires onto, and in the meantime, we threw a spare set of wheels and tires on to finish tuning. With the very first pull on E85, the difference is immediate. Where on Ben's naturally aspirated K-Series, E85 meant the difference of 9 wheel horsepower and 4 wheel torque, the force-inducted engine of the Evo sees a much more significant gain.
What have you done?
I just turned your Evo into an Evo. Wasn't an Evo before. Maybe it was just a Lancer. Exactly 25 pounds, up to 5,000 RPM, 354 torque, and 353 horse.
How much more do you think there is?
If I can't turn boost up, I just gotta play with timing. I just wanted to boost up to where it is, and then see how much we can get from there.
That's a gain of over 30 horsepower and almost 40 torque just from changing fueling. We're only going to tune it to 25 PSI, again something I'll explain later, but with no timing adjustment dialed in yet, there's still room for more power. A couple more pulls and we've arrived at our final numbers.
Can't read that far. 365, wow.
Thanks to the parts from MA Performance and the skillful labor and expertise of Ron and Paul, we've reached 365 wheel horsepower and 365 wheel torque on Ron's Mustang Dyno at 25 PSI. These numbers are right at what Ron was expecting from the start and more than enough for me. Most exciting is the beautiful power band and the immediacy of the boost.
We're gonna go nuts. We're gonna see if we can run more boost or what kind of power we're gonna get out of more boost. So right now I gave it about 8% more duty where peak boost is. So I'm expecting maybe 2-3 more pounds.
And this will never be used. This tune will never be used.
No. This is just for pure testing and the gram.
We do one final pull just for the gram, with boost running up to 29 PSI, which yields 370 wheel horsepower and 394 6-speed shattering torque.
Yeah, I'm gonna flash the 25 pound back in.
Killer.
Ronnie,
Yes.
are we done?
I hope so. I have to go. Yes, we're done.
Dude, you're the man.
Dude,
Thank
yeah.
you so much.
It's an honor. It's an honor. Thank you. Thank you. It all worked out. It's a little stressful, but I can tell everybody kind of got a little tension, but it all worked.
Are you satisfied with the tune?
Yes, I'm happy with it. It's about what I expected, 365.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it should be a good Evo.
Ron packs up to go take care of his familial responsibilities, and Paul and I get the new winter tires on the Evo, I think back to Monday, when the Evo rolled into the shop still with a tweaked frame, still with a stock head, a stock rear diff, unmodified suspension arms, bushings, a heavy quad exhaust, and a stock clutch. Ronnie, Paul, Andy, and Trung worked their butts off to completely overhaul the car in 3 days, and as the dyno has shown, it all worked perfectly. Thanks to a combination of the right people and the right parts, I'm more excited to drive this Evo than I ever have been before.
In true, extremely stressful gears and gasoline style, the first test drive of this vehicle, not on the dyno, is me driving 3 hours to Wisconsin to link up with Ben, who has not been here all day. So yeah, my blood pressure is through the roof. The car is insane. I'm super stoked to be driving it, but also I just want to get there. It's snowing. Everything about the car has changed. So I'm just praying for no issues. Just a 3 hour drive there, and then I can enjoy it and sort out any kinks or whatever when I finally actually get home.
The car drives flawlessly through the night. The framework from Trung was exact, and nothing will inspire more confidence in the snow than an Evo on fresh winter tires. By 1 a.m., absolutely exhausted but absolutely elated, I've arrived at our hotel with what feels like a completely different car. The next morning, Ben and I meet at Andy's shop to load up the Evo for the drive home, and of course, I can't resist breaking everything in. As a videographer and editor by trade, I enjoy working on my cars, but I'm not an expert. While I could have tried to do all of this work myself, it would have taken much longer, been done much worse, and in some cases, like the frame, couldn't have been done at all. The assistance from MA Performance in supplying all the parts that I needed, and the expertise of Ronnie, Paul, Andy, and Trung allowed me to do what I do best: film and tell a story. Now that it's home and I can relax, I finally get a chance to admire the result of the work that's taken place. It's still a salvage title Evo with 130,000 miles, but it's a car that I'm so excited to own, now more than ever.